It's hard to believe that such a thing still happens these days. I found myself thinking vaguely about it in the narrow hallway of my apartment. There was a thick envelope on the small showbox. Inside it was payoff money. I had a girlfriend. Her name was Michelle. She was the only daughter of the chairman of the Johnson General Hospital, one of the largest hospitals in town. Last night, I proposed to Michelle, and this is the result. Suddenly, Michelle's father showed up at my apartment and looked at me as if I were trash. He said, "I won't let my daughter marry an uneducated loser." Then, saying it's payoff money, he left a thick envelope on the table. Michelle seems to have had her cell phone taken away by her father, so I can't get in touch with her. Just like that, my relationship with Michelle abruptly ended. My name is Rick, and I turned 32 this year. Currently, I'm the vice president of a gaming company I started with a friend. There were a lot of ups and downs to get here, but I believe everything has been a learning experience for me. Deep in my heart, there are things that I've yet to fully come to terms with. My father passed away when I was young, and my mother raised me on her own. Ever since middle school, I wanted to start working early. Being the eldest son, I have 3 younger sisters. When I told my mom that I had decided to quit high school and work while attending night school, she looked at me with guilt and bowed deeply to me. It wasn't that I loved studying, but telling her about the night school was more of an excuse to make her understand. I remember feeling humbled when she bowed so deeply. Together, my mom and I supported our family, ensuring my sisters could follow their desired paths. That gave me a lot of confidence. In the end, I kept working at a florist that I've been part of since my part-time days. That's when I first met Michelle. I think I was 25 and she was 22. Every Monday and Thursday afternoon, she would come into the shop to buy fresh flowers. She never bought large bouquets, just a few stems, and then she'd leave. We'd exchange a few words every time. Little by little, I found myself drawn to her shy and modest character. Michelle is the kind of girl you don't often see these days, with a quiet, reserved, and pure demeanor. Even someone as thick-skinned as me could immediately tell from the way she carried herself that she came from a good upbringing. On Valentine's Day, when she gave me chocolates, I realized for the first time that she had feelings for me. I asked her out right then and there. Our relationship was smooth sailing. We never had an argument. Life was hectic for me. Being invited to co-found a business by a friend might have been a contributing factor. The only time Michelle and I could really meet was on Sundays. With my sister still in school and tuition fees to pay, I didn't have a lot of money for myself. Our dates were mostly in the park. Every time, Michelle would bring along a homemade lunch, and we'd spend our time in the park. I loved that. After dating for a year, I mustered up the courage to propose to her. I felt that if Michelle stayed by my side for the rest of my life, I could push myself many times harder. I couldn't afford a ring worth 3 months of my salary and got her a cheaper one, but Michelle cried tears of joy after she saw it. She kept repeating, "Thank you." I swore I'd make her happy, but by the next morning, I felt like I'd been thrown into hell. The last time I saw Michelle, she had a tear-streaked face from crying with happiness. Our time together ended right there. Starting today, we have a few new recruits coming in. I was approached by HR as soon as I arrived at the office. The company had grown unimaginably since its inception, with almost 30 employees. After my heartbreak, I got seriously involved in a startup with a friend. He founded a gaming company. I've always loved games, and after seeing a game I created, he approached me to co-found the company. I dedicated myself to this job. The company grew rapidly. Now we're focusing on nurturing esports talents. My current job involves scouting esports players. It's quite a fulfilling job. Many young folks aspire to be professional esports players, but taking that first step can be challenging. I believe it's because its recognition in society is still somewhat limited. When job prospects come up, I bet very few parents would understand if their child says, "I want to be a pro gamer." Many kids are already making money by streaming games, but few share that with their parents. Streamers who make a living off game streaming need to put in the effort to make others understand their line of work. I support those kids who feel stuck because those around them don't understand what they're passionate about. I believe my job is to back their dreams. The recruits coming in today are between 18 and 26 years old. We plan to hire them as professionals. Among them, there's one guy I see as a key player. His name is Key. He's a player who excels in multiplayer online battle arenas, MOBA. Simply put, MOBA is a game style where you team up and cooperate with allies to attack and conquer the enemy's base. It requires both strategy and ability to make split-second decisions. I felt Key had an exceptional talent. "I'm Key Johnson. It is a pleasure to meet you all," he said, introducing himself. He's tall and good-looking, although he seemed a bit rough around the edges. The way he responded and carried himself showed he came from a good upbringing. A good young man. The women in the office were clearly impressed by him. After a brief greeting, Key started handling insurance paperwork and other administrative tasks in the HR department. It's a busy day since there are other new hires, and each needs to be directed to their respective departments. That's when I overheard a surprised voice from one of the female clerks. My feet stopped dead in their tracks when the clerk said, "He's the son of the Johnson General Hospital chairman. You know, Johnson General Hospital is the home of a girl like... Can't forget Michelle." I remember Michelle mentioning that she's an only daughter with one younger brother who doesn't have the inclination or aptitude for medical studies. Now I understand why Michelle's dad told me her future husband has to be a doctor. It might be pointless to think about it now, but if Key had gone to med school and become a doctor, maybe Michelle, and I could have gotten married. I was called an uneducated trash. The opposition to our marriage wasn't just because of inheritance issues. I admit that I had my own shortcomings, yet I couldn't help but wonder what if I had become a doctor. A fact I never realized when I first scouted Key. Would I have recruited him if I'd known he was Michelle's brother? Mixing personal feelings with business is downright unacceptable. I kept reminding myself of that. Otherwise, I couldn't imagine supporting Key's dream. Key, as I thought, immediately became a vital member of our team. At the welcome party, he introduced himself, saying he was the son of a hospital chairman, but couldn't give up his dream, so he left. Everyone gave him a warm applause for his determination. I clapped along, but something still felt off. "You don't go home, you live alone, right?" I casually inquired about his personal life during the party. "I've cut ties with my family. When I said I didn't want to become a doctor, they disowned me." "I think my sister will have to marry someone taking over the hospital," Keith mumbled. I do feel a bit guilty about my sister watching him. I felt a burning anger rise within me. Must be tough for your sister, all because you decided to be selfish. She's taking all the heat because of you, isn't she? Even I thought it was a mean thing to say. At that moment, I couldn't control my emotions. I harshly lashed out at a man almost a decade younger than me. Keith flinched slightly but firmly said, "I don't regret it. I know my dream might have come at someone else's expense, but I can't give up." The thought of giving up never even crossed my mind. That's the determination I bring here. Keith spoke of his determination. I wished I could blame him for distorting the future Rochelle, and I could have had. Such pettiness made me ashamed of myself. Still, the unresolved feelings continued to smoulder within me. In esports, maintaining concentration amidst high tension is crucial, especially in the game Keith plays. This is essential. It's the same even in regular practice matches. There's constant competition within the team, no different from any other sport. Only the best among the team get to play in matches. Those who can't produce results get phased out. That's the world of professionals. Many push themselves too hard and get sick. It's our job to guide them so that doesn't happen. Keith has a touch of genius, but he never forgets to work hard. I deeply wanted to support him, but I felt ashamed of my inability to do so. Then the incident happened. It was Keith's official debut match, a big tournament with a large number of participating teams. It was a knockout format. Keith's team kept on winning. With the lights dimmed in the venue, a large monitor lit up. Players sat in front of computers engrossed in their game, surrounded by a large audience. They had to keep their composure during the match. If they let the pressure get to them, they'd lose. Holding my breath, I closely watched Keith's character across the screen. Then it seemed like Keith, seated in his chair, tilted his head slightly. The next moment, with a crashing sound, Keith fell from his chair to the ground. On the screen, the character controlled by Keith stood still as the opposing team attacked. "Are you okay, Keith?" I rushed over to find Keith gasping for breath on the floor. An ambulance was immediately called. When it arrived, I ended up riding with him. The paramedic told me we're heading to the Johnson General Hospital's emergency room. I was a bit surprised. It seems there is a mysterious connection between the Johnsons and me. I tried to avoid it, but it felt like I was drawing this fate closer. I felt uneasy when he was brought into the emergency room. I waited outside the treatment room. Suddenly, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps approaching down the hallway. I didn't want to assume, but I couldn't help but feel tense. My suspicions were confirmed. It was Michelle, now grown into a mature woman. She walked toward me with a pale face. She must have been taught not to run in the hospital corridors since she was a child. A frustrated frown creased her forehead. "You're from Keith's company, right? Where's Keith?" "How's Keith doing?" she said, looking at the treatment room's door, completely unaware of my presence. She was looking at the door and didn't notice me at all. She was clearly worried about her younger brother and seemed too preoccupied to notice anything else. I felt bad for Kay, but my heart braced more for Michelle. He just went into the treatment room. I managed to answer, and Michelle's slender shoulders shuddered. Then, with great force, she turned to me. Her white eyes looked as if they could overflow with tears, staring deep into mine. "Is it Rick?" Her voice trembled as she asked. I nodded confidently in response. "It's been a while. Who would have thought we'd meet like this?" Michelle looked like she was about to burst into tears any moment. I was frozen, not knowing what to do. The tension between us was broken by the nurse's invitation. "Please come in." Normally, only family would be allowed in. "Can I come in too?" I'm really worried. When I asked, Michelle gave a small nod in agreement. Keith was lying in bed with an IV drip. He looked much better, which was a bit relieving. "Doctor, how's he doing? Is he going to be okay?" Michelle, clutching the hem of my jacket, looked up with concern. I spoke up on her behalf, addressing the doctor. The doctor said he's overworked, probably pushed himself too hard, lack of sleep, not eating right, gaming all night. I suppose the decision was to keep him overnight for observation. We both felt relieved that it wasn't more serious. The patient himself, Heath, was soundly asleep. "I'll go grab some things he'll need for the overnight stay." Thinking Michelle should stay by Keith's side, I made the offer. "Could you? Thank you so much." To reassure Michelle, I grinned and said, "Leave it to me." Seeing that Michelle's face softened a little, that's when it happened. Suddenly, the treatment room door was flung open. The loud bang startled everyone inside, including the nurses. Keith, always causing trouble, entering with a loud shout, was Dr. Johnson in a white coat. He was Michelle and Keith's father. He was, without a doubt, my archenemy. And overworking, after all the talk, and leaving the house like that. Should have listened to me and become a doctor. He grabbed Keith's collar and started shaking him. The nurses rushed to intervene. This isn't how a doctor should behave towards a patient. A nurse trying to intervene, Dr. Johnson, raised his hand to strike Keith and shouted, "Wake up." Without thinking, I grabbed his arm. "Stay out of it. This is a family matter." The annoyed doctor started yelling at me. I had no intention of letting go. With all due respect, that doesn't look like a family matter to me. Keith is one of our best. I'd appreciate it if you refrain from violence. Hearing that, Dr. Johnson looked at me immediately. His eyes widened, and his mouth twisted in shock. It seemed that he finally recognized who I was. "You dare to deceive my daughter, and now my precious son too, you uneducated piece of trash." The doctor's words ignited memories of my past anger. But I'm not the same person I was back then. I won't be shaken by such remarks. As the doctor and I locked eyes, Keith woke up. "Wait, Dad, sis." I wasn't in the middle of a game, struggling to grasp the situation. Keith's confusion was evident. I gently embraced him, explaining that he had collapsed and was brought to the hospital. "Keith, get back home now. I can still get you into a decent medical school. You wouldn't go wrong if you just listened to me." The doctor's harsh rebuke made Keith bite his lip. Always being dictated and controlled like this, that's probably why he ran away, I thought. Keith's an adult now. He makes his own decisions. Your children have grown beyond your reach. I positioned myself between Keith and the doctor, shielding both Michelle and Keith. The doctor's face, filled with anger, grabbed at my collar. "You seem rather bold now. You can't hide that you quickly bailed out on my daughter with that payoff money," Michelle gasped and said from behind me. "That money was returned to you ages ago." I replied with a provocative smirk. The doctor shouted, "You're lying." "Dad, aren't you familiar with Rick's company? They've been generously donating every year." Keith's voice reflected his growing impatience. What are you talking about? Donations every year? You can't be serious." I brushed off the doctor's hand, presenting my business card once again. Recognizing the company name, the doctor's confidence wavered. "I donated that money immediately. Why would I keep it? I always intended to come back for Michelle one day." I spilled out the promise I'd held deep in my heart. The promise that, always suppressing my feelings, deceiving even myself, but I can't do that anymore. My life has always been intertwined with Michelle's. Today, our unexpected reunion made those feelings come flooding back. I've been making donations to Johnson General Hospital under my company name, initially just to repay that payoff money. The continuous donations were because I couldn't let go of my connection with Michelle. Maybe I was testing my own resolve. For a private clinic, donations are a lifeline. Staring intently at my card, the doctor suddenly changed his demeanor. "If only you'd said so. My apologies for the misunderstanding. We're always grateful for your support." "Please keep it coming." His demeanour had shifted completely. He seemed nonchalant, but was oddly ingratiating. He's probably afraid I'd get upset and stop the donations. "Well, I'll leave the rest to you." With that, he made a hasty exit, leaving us all dumbfounded. The rest of us were just left in shock. Both the attending physician and the nurses had surprised looks on their faces due to the sudden change in the doctor's behaviour. "Well then, Keith, you will be admitted for the night. Remember, managing one's health is part of a professional's job. Be more cautious from now on." "I'm sorry. I will be more careful, Rick. Thank you so much for standing up to my father so firmly." "I was truly moved, thank you," Heath exclaimed with joy. I felt somewhat embarrassed. Receiving praise head-on is something I never really got used to. Michelle chuckled as she watched my reaction. "Listen, Michelle, it's super late, and you might be fed up waiting, but if you're still single..." I mustered up the courage to tell her that. Before I could finish, Michelle interrupted. "I am single. I hadn't gotten married. I couldn't forget about you after you suddenly disappeared." The earnest look in her eyes left me speechless. After I had vanished, Michelle had confronted my father. Mother had heard what had transpired, what my father had done, and felt devastated. But she laughed, saying she never thought she wouldn't see me again. "I always felt that our paths would cross again. I knew it in my heart," Michelle said. She had been looking forward to that day. Tears threatened to spill from my eyes thinking about her holding on to that tiny glimmer of hope. Every day after our separation made my heart ache. "I'll bring a much nicer ring next time." As I said this, scratching my head, Michelle shook hers. "I like that ring. You still have it, right?" Feeling like she saw right through me, I scratched my head and responded, "You got me. Of course, I still have it." The ring that was returned to me as if to sever our ties. "I want that ring on my finger again." I nodded firmly in response to Michelle's words. At that moment, the entire treatment room erupted into applause. The doctor, nurses, and Keith all clapped their hands, saying, "Good for you," as a gesture of celebration. Suddenly, I snapped back to reality. Michelle and I weren't alone. Feeling embarrassed, I hastily left the treatment room. A few days later, Michelle and I both went to meet the doctor. At first, the doctor refused to see us, but Michelle's tears eventually won him over. "All right, I'll approve the marriage, but on one condition." The head doctor's condition was to forget about the old words, he said, which was amusing. "It's probably about that comment he made about me being an uneducated trash," I quickly replied. Of course, I wanted to register our marriage right away, but due to work, it kept getting postponed. The one who ran out of patience was Michelle, and unusually she puffed up her cheeks, raising her voice in protest at me. She hardly ever gets angry. She hesitated a bit and then complained in a soft voice, "Please don't keep me waiting any longer." Seeing Michelle blushing and speaking shyly, I realized how long I'd kept her waiting. "I'll do it right away." I stood up and left my work. I grabbed her hand and rushed to the county clerk's evening counter. Michelle said, "Wait," but I had no intention of waiting any longer. Our pace quickened, and by the time the county building was in sight, we were both running, our hands tightly holding onto each other. I swore in my heart I would never let go of this hand for the rest of my life.